Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining this Hangout on Air. My name is Mary and I'm an account manager at Google, and I work every day with publishers like you to help you maximize your revenue using Google products like AdSense, AdX, and DFP. As you know, we at Google love data, and analytics is a great tool for publishers to analyze their website data. So I'm here to show you just a couple of reports that you can leverage in Google Analytics to help you maximize your revenue through our monetization products. And hopefully along the way, you can leverage these reports to learn more about your users and improve the overall user experience. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and we can get into it. Okay. So the majority of you probably know what analytics is and are using it in some capacity. And if not, I highly recommend starting. I'm not going to dive into the basics of how to use analytics, but if you're unfamiliar with how to use it, there's a lot of excellent self-study material that's available in the Google Analytics Academy. But at a high level, Google Analytics is a free web analytics platform that records and reports visits on your website. So as you probably know, you can use analytics to extract really helpful information about your users, their demographics, their behavior, and how they relate and interact with your content. In fact, there's so many ways that you can use analytics, and there's so many different ways that you can look at your publisher data that to many of my publishers, it feels a little bit overwhelming. And so the purpose of this presentation is to just keep it simple and high level, with our focus mainly aimed on using analytics to maximize your ad revenue. So let's start with the basics. How do we think about maximizing revenue? Well, revenue as a publisher is a function of the number of page impressions times the click-through rate times the cost per click. So if we want to maximize revenue, we need to focus on maximizing these three levers by identifying which pages are getting the most views, identifying where on those pages the majority of users are engaging, and identifying the different segments of users and or the content that could be associated with higher revenue on your pages. So let's dive into the first way that we can maximize revenue. And so this is to identify the pages with the most traffic. The landing pages report highlights the pages that the majority of your users are landing on. So if you're thinking about maximizing revenue, the more pages a user visits, the more ad impressions you show, and therefore the more money you make. Our goal here is to identify the pages with the most views and make sure that they're well optimized. Because if we focus on high traffic pages, the incremental revenue impact from even a small adjustment is going to be magnified. So what do we mean by optimize? It's very simple. Do you have ads on those pages? And if you do, are those ads well placed? As you may or may not know, advertisers can now bid on viewable impressions. So if you move your ads to more viewable areas of your site, you can potentially increase your earnings. So here's an example of what the landing page report looks like. So if you navigate in your analytics account to behavior, site content, and landing pages, you'll see that in the first column, you can find a list of the URLs, which is automatically sorted by the number of sessions on each page. And then you can navigate to these URLs and optimize your pages accordingly. But when we think about optimizing landing pages, of course, we're going to say, okay, are there ads or are there not ads? And are they well placed? But I really want to stress the importance of landing pages from a user experience perspective. Think of a landing page as a blind date. So as a publisher, your landing page is your chance to make a good first impression to your users. And you really can only do that once. So in addition to proper ad placement, your goal should be give the user the content that they're looking for. Make sure your site looks and feels legitimate, so it's not scammy with ads all over the place, and show users that you have more great content that they might be interested in. This is going to keep visitors on your site, which is not only going to earn you more money, but it's also going to enhance your user loyalty in the long run. So that brings me to my next point, which is, where are you losing users? One of the metrics on the landing report is the bounce rate, and that measures in single page visits where users entered and exited your site from the same page. So One thing you can do is sort the landing pages report by bounce rate to help you identify where you're going to be missing, where you're missing out on the opportunity to impress your users. And like we talk about in a blind date, form a lasting relationship with them. Another way to exit that you can examine where you're losing your users is by looking at the exit pages report. So again, in behavior, site content, and exit pages. And so this is going to show you the pages that users are most commonly exiting from. What you might be wondering, what's the difference between an exit and a bounce? Well, a bounce is when a user left on the same page that they landed on without interacting with that page. And an exit is where they did interact with the page, or they navigated through multiple pages. So sometimes an exit is totally fine. The user could have found what they're looking for and left your site. But it's always worth asking the question, why are my users leaving? And can I keep them by showing them that we offer more great content that they came to my site to look for? So the final way to hit the high traffic pages with a lot of impressions is to follow the user path. And so the navigation summary is an interesting way to do this. Again, it's another behavior site content report. So you're going to navigate to the all pages report, which will automatically default to where it says Explorer, but then you're going to click on navigation summary. So as you can see, this report drills down on one page. In this example, it's the home page where you see current selection says /home, but you can choose which pages to focus on. I would always recommend starting with focusing on the landing pages that you've identified as having really high traffic. But right now we're focusing on the home page, and you can see on the left where it says entrances that 89% of users entered this site on the home page. And it also shows you that of the users who, it also shows you the percentage of users who entered from previous pages on your site. So here in this case, 11% of users entered from a previous page on your site. And when you see previous page path, this basically shows you that of those 11% who entered from a previous page on your site, these are the URLs that they entered from. So then if you look to the right, it shows you what percentage of users exited from this page, what percentage of users continued on to additional pages of your site, and of those users, so of the 40% who continued on to additional pages of their site, what the URL was of their next page path. So where did they navigate to? The navigation summary is just another tool, and it not only highlights the popular pages on your site, but you can analyze these pages to make sure they're well optimized, but it also gives you insight onto your user behavior, or into your user behavior. So think about it as a publisher. What do you expect or want your users to do on your site? And does their navigation path reflect that? You can use this report to follow the user path based on what the majority of users are doing. And sometimes you can reach a page that has an unexpectedly high exit rate, or you could be surprised at the navigation decisions of the users. You then have the opportunity to analyze and correct these pages to better retain your users and get them to do what you want them to do on your site. So just to give you a quick example, one of my publishers writes health-related articles, and the majority of his articles are in the form of slideshows. He was relatively well optimized from an ads perspective, so we were able to take a deep dive into analytics. And when we looked at the landing pages report, we determined that his most popular slideshow article was about one particular disease. We used the navigation summary to analyze the user path as they went through his slideshow, and that showed us that users were staying for pretty much the whole show. And then we analyzed the exit pages report, which confirmed to us that most users were exiting on the 10th slide, which was the last slide of the slideshow. The navigation summary again showed us that of the users who stayed, they were searching for treatments, symptoms, and causes of that specific disease. So my advice to him was just give users what they're looking for up front by providing internal site links with the content that they were searching for anyway. So in this case, treatments, symptoms, and causes. So he tried it out, and he noticed that instead of exiting, a lot of users actually remained on his site, and he increased his pages per session by 36%, which also increased revenue. So Google's Match Content product is a great way to do this actually at scale. And a lot of times publishers hire content recommendation tools to put those thumbnail images at the bottom of their articles. But sometimes the images that they show can be slightly offensive or kind of like clickbait ads. So one question I always ask my publishers is, are you considering the demographic of the majority of your users? You can leverage analytics to figure out what the demographic of your users is, and I highly recommend enabling this feature. Because, for example, my particular publisher's main demographic was 55-year-old women, but he was showing these images of people getting arrested or graphic images of different types of diseases that you can get on your foot. And so, like, remember, these links are to external sites, so they're driving users off your page, but they are shown in a native format, and the thumbnails can be mistaken as your images. So this publisher, when I asked him, was only making 20 cents every time somebody clicked on one of these articles. So he's showing these somewhat offensive images to 55 to 60-year-old women who are potentially mistaking that for his site content and driving them away from his site only for 20 cents. If a user had just stayed on his site and viewed another page, he actually would have made more money since his RPM was much higher than 20 cents. So providing internal site links or even using Google's new match content product doesn't drive users away from your pages. It actually uses the publisher's own images, and it keeps users on your site. So the value of a new page view is obviously more than 20 cents. And our new product actually now allows ads to be layered in, so publishers can monetize on these units as well. So overall, what does this mean for you? More money, a better user experience, and it's ultimately better for brand recognition and user loyalty. So now that we've identified the pages with the most traffic, we want to zone in on those particular pages and understand where on the pages that users are engaging. So what do we mean by that? Basically, where are users clicking? Where are they scrolling? Because when you identify where users are clicking and scrolling, you've then identified the viewable areas on your page. And I think of this as the high-value real estate on your pages. So once you've identified these high-value parts of your pages, you can place what matters most to you as a publisher into those parts of the page. So you can leverage the high-value real estate to improve the viewability of your ads, to promote your own content with internal site links, like we talked about with match content. You can use it to get users to sign up for an email or get users to share the article that they're reading on social media. So the first way to do this is to download the in-page analytics Chrome extension. And what this does is it provides real-time stats on how users are interacting with your page. You can see on the left-hand side, the orange bubbles, which shows where exactly on this page users are clicking. And you can place your ads and your calls to actions nearby where you know users are going to be clicking. The second way to do this is through implementing scroll tracking. And so this does require a code, and the link is shared in here, and we can share this link with you after. But it basically uses events to track how far down the page a user scrolls. And this gives you a really good indication of viewability. Basically, these two features are there to replace a heat map, which can typically slow down your page. But scroll tracking is a really interesting one. And a cool user experience test that you can try is if you discover that an event triggers when the post loads after users scroll a certain way down the page, and then you determine that users have kind of stopped scrolling at a certain point, you can cut your article off where the users have stopped scrolling and add a click to keep reading button and then below that, you can try placing match content units or internal site links that if users are kind of done with that content, that they could then be interested in other parts of your page and click on those match content units. So again, just as a quick example, I had one publisher who published social articles, and he downloaded the page analytics extension and noticed, so his page actually looked like this. After looking at his page analytics, he noticed that users were clicking where the orange bubbles are on the right rail. And when we had a conversation, I asked him, like, he had a free email updates on the right rail, right above where he was clicking. And when we had our conversation, I asked, is this email sign up high value for him? Because it's in his viewable ad real estate. And it turned out that he was really just testing out the email sign up, but wasn't generating a lot of users, and it wasn't leading to a lot of conversions or much success in the revenue department at all. And when we looked at the ad unit that had that lower viewability, the 728 by 90, we noticed that the RPM of this particular ad unit was lower than the rest of his units. So what did we do? We swapped the ad placement with the email signups, and this resulted in the viewability score improving by almost 300%, and it increases ad unit RPM by 52%. So finally, the Publisher Pages report is, in my opinion, the best report ever. And we're going to use this report to improve the CPC by identifying high-value segments of your content. And so there is a small caveat in looking at the Publisher Pages report, and that is that you need to have your AdSense and your AdX hard-coded onto your site. So you actually, unfortunately, can't leverage DFP tags because you would need to be using Analytics Premium. But if you do have AdSense or AdX hard-coded onto your site, you can then integrate your analytics with your AdSense account. And the Publisher Pages report shows the AdSense revenue metrics layered onto specific URLs. So if you navigate to the Behavior, Site Content, Publisher Pages report, there's a lot you can do with this report. And I've highlighted it in previous slides, but we'll just take a look at the first way that you can look at these URLs. So the first thing you can do is sort by the number of impressions. And your goal here is to, just like we did in the landing pages report, identify your high traffic pages with ad impressions on them and then optimize them. The second thing you can do is sort by revenue. And so what this is going to show you is which pages are high performing. And then you can take those high performing pages and increase the traffic that you're getting to them by promoting them throughout your site. You can also use CTR as a measure of performance. So sorting by articles with high CTRs and then just promoting those ones that you know users are going to be clicking by providing internal site links and getting users there. And then the third and final thing you can do with this report, and I'm sure it's not final, there's plenty that you can do, is sort by eCPM. And so what you're doing here is identifying high value pages or pages where advertisers are actually paying you the most money, and then take those pages and invest in creating more similar content. So just to navigate back to this page, to provide an example, I was working with a vacation search site who I did this exercise with, and he was really well optimized, like a very advanced publisher. And so what we did was we first sorted the Publisher Pages report by impressions to identify the pages with the most traffic. And so we looked at all of his pages that were generating a lot of page views, and we made sure that each individual page had 3 well-placed ads. We then sorted by revenue to identify his high-performing content. So what we actually determined was that the content in certain vacation destination states performed better than other states. And so he then promoted that high-earning content by adding internal site links to the popular destinations on all of his pages. And then finally, we sorted by the cost per click, or the eCPM, to identify the high-value content. And using that, we determined that certain types of content was of higher value for him. So for example, date ideas and activities with kids were actually the highest earning articles. So we made sure to create that kind of content for every city. And so there's other ways to segment and analyze your website data to identify high value segments. So take, for example, location. Is one region making more money than another region? If so, you can write more stuff targeted to that to that region and in that language, and promote more sites in that particular area. And you can check out your traffic sources too. A lot of times publishers buy traffic and they use social media to promote their traffic. So if you are buying Taboola traffic, what's your return on in your investment, or any other type of content recommendation tool? Are you paying more than you're earning for those particular ads? And if you are, what about organic Facebook traffic? Like, what traffic on social media is performing really well for you, and are you investing in that? And if you're not, then maybe you could throw a little bit of money behind the articles that are doing really well organically on social media, and then you can boost your earnings in that sense. And you can also look at the content category. If you have articles, videos, or different authors, are there certain articles that are blowing up? Are there certain types of authors whose content is more effective? Are certain types of articles popular, like recipes versus blog posts or videos versus articles? And then device type is another big segment. Typically, you see a discrepancy in the amount that mobile traffic is worth versus desktop traffic. But you can also layer this onto your users. If you have returning users, you want your new users to emulate those paths. So compare the navigation and the way that new users interact with your site, and compare it to returning users, and try to see where they differ and how you can enable new users to follow that returning user path so that you can keep your users and retain more of them. So again, like we talked about, there's so much that you can do with analytics, but sticking to the main levers of revenue and focusing on maximizing those levers, just using these couple of reports is going to be really helpful in terms of maximizing your revenue. If you have any questions, I know that we do have a Dory, and I'd be happy to get back to you. Unfortunately, I'm not a technical expert, so I can't answer any technical questions from an analytics perspective, but I'd love to get your feedback on how this went. I'm happy to follow up via email with any questions that you have, and we have a forum attached to this site. And so I'm more than happy to respond with that and get your feedback on whether this was helpful, whether you'd like to see more of this type of content, and whether or not you plan on leveraging this kind of model to make any changes to improve the revenue, to maximize your revenue utilizing analytics. So thank you all again so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and hopefully this was helpful.